Hello. This week we have Parsha Pinchas. Pinchas begins where the last Parsha ends. So last week we talked about Parshat Balak, and even though Balak's plan, the original plan to have Am Yisrael cursed by Bilam failed, still he and the Midianites decided to nevertheless try some sort of a special kind of attack on Israel, sort of to infiltrate them and have them start worshiping, the Moabite and the Midianite gods, and seducing them with their women. So it was all packed in one thing together. At the end of the previous parsha, in Perek Kafhei, it basically begins in the first verse, chapter 25, Vayashav Yisrael b'Shittim vayachel ha'am liznot el bnot Moav. So Israel is sitting in the Shittim, which is an area there, and the people begin prostituting with the daughters of Moab. Vatikrena la'am lezivchei Elohehen vayochal ha'am vayishtachu le'Elohehen. So they called them to their gods, and the people ate and bow down to the Moabite gods. Vayitzamed Yisrael leVaal Peor, vayichar af Hashem b'Yisrael. So the people then were nitzmad, which was like sort of they got attached, they physically connected with Baal Peor, which was the idol of their god, which is sort of the way of worshiping it. This might also have some sexual context. This sort of touching it, and God became angry, and then God, tells Moshe, go and take care of this problem. And then Moshe, trying to, keep everything at bay, is unable to do it because suddenly, sort of in broad daylight, right before Moshe, Hine ish mibnei Yisrael ba. A man from Israel comes, vayikra v'lechav et hamidyanit le'nei Moshe, ve'le'nei kol adat b'nei Yisrael, v'hem ha'bochim petach ohel moed. So he comes, and in front of Moshe, right in his face, basically takes this Midianite woman in front of everybody. And then Pinchas sees this, and he kills them both. He sticks a romach, which is some sort of a blunt sword, I think, or a spike of some sort, and he sticks it through them and kills them. And then God stopped the plague that was striking Israel, which by that point had already killed 24,000 people. And the parsha begins with God telling Moshe, listen to me, I send Pinchas my blessing, my peace. And it specifically says, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Heshiv et chamati me'al bnei Yisrael, bekan'o el kinati betocham. So it mentions Pinchas' lineage. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Pinchas, son of Elazar, son of Aaron the Kohen. Aaron, who by now has already died. He died last, not last parsha. He died. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think he died the parsha before. Anyway, that's beside that point. And so the Midrash tries to understand why do we mention Pinchas' lineage? So the first Midrash from Chuma on the Parsha says the following: Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, מה ראה הקדוש ברוך הוא לייחס פנחס אחר מעשה זה? Why did we mention Pinchas' lineage? שבשעה שנדקר זמרי כוזבי, so at the time that Zimri, the male who had taken this woman, nidkar im Kozbi, once he was killed with Kozbi bat Tzur was the woman, the Midianite woman he had taken in front of everyone. Shepitem avi imo, amdu ashvatim alav, ve'amru reitem ben puti ze. All the tribes came and huddled around Pinchas and were very upset. They said, look at this Ben Puti. We'll say what that means in a moment. Shepitem avi imo agalim le'avodah zarah. That his mother's father was a worshipper of idols. Harag nasi shevet miYisrael. He killed a leader of Israel because Zimri was one of the one of the Nesi'im, one of the leaders. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. That's why they mentioned his other lineage. So in other words, they came and got upset with him. How dare he kill one of the Nesi'im? And so the Midrash says, and they say, you who come from a lineage of idol worshippers, how dare you, kill one of our own, right? And so the Midrash, so the verse says, he also has lineage within, sort of a pure lineage, so to speak, inside the people of Israel. And so that's it. That's why it mentions it, to sort of remind us all that he comes from, from a good family, right, within the community. This, of course, if you've been listening to this post for several months now, you should know that by now that this is not good enough, right? We need to understand what exactly is the Midrash talking about over here. First of all, it's a very strange situation. People are dying. There's a plague going on. Pinchas gets up, kills this guy. Poof! The plague stops, and God is somehow appeased, and the people of Israel come and want to accuse Pinchas of something. So that's in and of itself very, very strange. But it's not so strange if we think a little bit about a lot of the stuff that was said about Pinchas in Chazal. Chazal learned from this story a very famous halacha, or not halacha, which is Habo'el Aramit Kanaim Pogim Bo. A person who is Bo'el Aramit, who is sleeping with an Aramite, sort of a non-Jew, maybe of a specific kind, an Aramit, Kanaim Pogim Bo. Zealots may strike him. Zealots may kill him. This is a very interesting halacha. It's mentioned in the Gemara and been given as a verdict in the Rambam, as a law in the Rambam. And it's very interesting because what does this mean, zealots strike at him? It also says that if the zealot comes and asks the rabbis, can he do it? Can he strike this person for what he's doing? That they have to tell him no. And sort of that, we see here that it's not a real halacha. It's sort of something that we allow to happen in our community, but we don't sanction it. Okay, we say this is what can happen, but we don't sanction it. And as such, it's very interesting, right? Usually halacha has very, clear guidelines of what you can and can't do. This idea that, on the one hand, we'll say, yeah, zealots can do this, but we're not going to officially say it's okay, is very, very, very interesting. And in fact, some people explain that what it means when we say, if you ask the rabbis to do it, they tell him no, is because if you come to the rabbi to ask, you're not a zealot. A zealot is a person who, it's burning in him. He can't control himself. He will just do it because he believes in it, right? And so if he has the time and the state of mind to come and ask a rabbi, he's not a zealot. So it automatically sort of, excludes him from that category. And of course, we're going to tell him, you cannot do this. So Pinchas is a zealot. And zealots scare us, right? It's enough for you to see, all the vigilante movies, Spider-Man, Batman, all these things, where even though the hero does good things for the city, he still is persecuted by the law enforcement. And why is that? Well, because nobody is above the law, and the fact that you're a zealot shouldn't mean that you can do whatever you feel like. And zealots, and that scare us, because there are people that work outside the law. Maybe they do the right thing, or something that might be understood as the right thing. But hey, if everybody does that, then we're going to have chaos. We'll have, complete havoc, and then no society can function, etc., etc., etc. And so, they see Pinchas come along, do this thing, without trial, without due process, without a warrant, right? And they're scared, or they're upset. How dare he do this? And look, it's not just any guy. He didn't just kill some homeless hobo, right? He killed one of the leaders of the people. Okay, the leader wasn't doing something wrong, but fine, catch him, bring him before a judge, let Moshe judge him, let God judge him. Who are you? Who do you think you are going ahead and doing this? This, who do you think you are, is exactly what we hear in those words that they said. Your mother's father was an idol worshiper. Who do you think you are? And so then we can say, the answer of the Midrash is, I'll tell you who he thinks he is. He's the grandson of Aaron. That's really, really impressive. Interesting, good beginning, but still not good enough. Because again, so what? So he's the descendant of Aaron. Does that give him extra rights? Does that mean that, we need to sort of treat him differently? So I want to say two things. I want to say something about Pinchas and something about zealots. So I'll start with the zealots in general. Rav Kook has a very interesting idea about zealots. He says zealots have one important thing, in that when there's only a few of them, then they remind us, so they give us a direction of where we want to be, and make sure we don't confuse balance with mediocrity. In other words, the problem with people that are not zealots, which is most of us, is that when we consider it to be a balanced lifestyle, some sort of balance between the different ideals that we believe in, can also sink into mediocrity. It can become something that you just, instead of saying I believe in a complex world, lots of gray, then there's only gray, and actually there's no black and white. It's not that gray is a mixture of black and white and we're somehow dealing with that tension. No, but you just think that everything is the same and you just do whatever you want. That's not complex, and that's not a true sort of serious way to tackle reality. But it's difficult for a person to determine sometimes if what's going on in the world is, or what's going on in his world is mediocrity, or if it's complexity. Zealots, by giving us a direction, by saying, this is black, this is white, don't forget it, make sure that we keep us on our toes. And so, zealots can be tolerated in Judaism, and this is the one case where Judaism explicitly does, when it's, for a limited amount, in a limited scope, but because they're important, because they give us some sort of a direction. Okay, that's just about zealots in general, and I'm not going to go into that too much. I want to focus about Pinchas, and the specific focuses issues of the Midrash with Pinchas. Let's go back to that statement, that when they say Ben Putize, she'aviv pitem avi imo agalim le'avodah zarah. He's the son of Puti. Who's Puti? So Puti is one of the names that's associated with Yitro. Jethro, right? Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law. Apparently, according to this, Elazar, Aharon's son, also married another one of Yitro's daughters. So we have basically over here, sort of like you can think of this as that in some interesting way. Elazar, Pinchas's father, is Moshe's brother-in-law. Okay, and Yitro, who was a Midianite priest, right, was indeed sacrificed things to avodah zarah until he converted, until he became a Jew. But I think that first of all, what we can see here is that there's something deeper about this claim. It's not only you're an outsider. It's not even only you're somehow related to to some people that weren't serious. It's that you, Pinchas, are the child of a former Midianite. You are actually the result of a matching between a male Jew and a female Midianite, right? She converted, okay? But still, you are the product of that. You are the offspring of that coupling. And here you go, and you kill a male Jew coupling together with a female Midianite. How dare you? Isn't this hypocrisy? Now of course it's not hypocrisy, right? We're talking about the difference between conversion and not conversion, right? And we're talking about Yitro converted to Judaism, and here this wasn't only about the illicit relationship that was taking place. This is also about the avodah zarah, the idol worship that this was all part of. It wasn't just them being together. It was part of an entire idol worship ritual that was taking place, which is part of why it was so terrible. So, but that's sort of like you can already see that the statement is much more sharp, right? That the argument, the claim against Pinchas wasn't only about sort of how dare you do this? You're an outsider. It wasn't even about that. It was about you're being hypocritical over here, right? How dare you do this when you yourself are the result of this thing, are an outcome of this kind of a relationship. But in that case, if we're really talking about that, I think we have to go even deeper into understanding the sentence over here. Shepitem avi imo agalim le'avodah zarah. They don't just say his father worshipped avodah zarah. Yitro has 7 names according to Chazal. They could have said Yitro, they could have said this. The Midrash chose Puti, Shepitem avi imo agalim le'avodah zarah. This is very interesting because Pitem agalim, to feed, to take agalim, to take calves for avodah zarah. You can't, a Bible-aware Jew cannot hear the term agalim and avodah zarah, egel and avodah zarah, and not think about chet hagel, right? About the sin of the golden calf, and especially in the context of Aaron, right? Because what the Midrash is saying is, let me remind you, he's also the child of Aaron. Aaron also was mifatem agalim avodah zarah. Aaron himself, right? Took part in putting together the golden calf, which was worshipped in avodah zarah, at least according to some explanations. When Moshe was up in Mount Sinai, and so the Midrash choosing this thing, I think, is harking to that, and I think is also trying to explain to us now what Pinchas, sort of part of Pinchas's motivation and part of Pinchas's sort of justification for what he did, beyond what I said before, just being a zealot and stepping up when no one else will and not waiting for due process. Pinchas is Aaron's grandson, and Aaron, when he was faced with avodah zarah, he made a choice. We talked about this in past midrashim. He chose to go with the people of Israel so that they don't, maybe perhaps to somehow slow them down on their descent into this terrible worship until Moshe comes. But he decided to go with them, and on some level was punished for it. Right? There are different opinions as to how, but definitely was rebuked for this, and definitely felt like he was carrying that sin around all his life. Now here we are, on the eve of going into Israel, finally. This is after the 40 years have passed. And then, out of nowhere, the people of Israel deviate, and now in a much worse situation, a much worse condition, a much worse act, they go and worship not just any avodah zarah, but Baal Peor, which is a truly hedonistic, full of of sexual activity and other terrible things, kind of idolatry. Pinchas sees this, and Aaron isn't around, and Moshe and Elazar aren't functioning, and he sees this, and he sees it happening all over again. He heard his grandfather's stories, he heard his father's stories, or his father was alive then too, maybe he was too, but he was probably too young, because this is 40 years ago, right? And he knows that this is not good. He knows somebody has to put a stop to this. Not again, he says to himself. This cannot happen again. This cannot stop us. We can't continue going into this never-ending cycle of sin and idolatry and be stuck here forever. It has to be stopped. And he gets up and he does something. When the Midrash says that Pinchas is Aaron's grandson, they're saying, I believe, that he has another grandfather who also was Mefatem Agalim Avodah Zarah and regretted it for his entire life. And he's not going to let that happen again. He's going to stop it. Where his father decided, for good reasons, maybe he made a mistake, but for good reasons decided to go along with it, Pinchas decided, no, we're going to put a stop to this, and put a stop to it now. And so his motivation wasn't was pure. It wasn't just pure. It's that if you come along and say, you're being hypocritical, Pinchas says, I'm not being hypocritical. I know what this cost us last time. This is my legacy from my grandparents, of leaving avodah zarah from Yitro, fighting of not letting avodah zarah pass me by. I know from Aaron's mistakes. I'm going to do something about it, and Pinchas goes ahead and does something. I'll finish up with a famous word that I heard and I've mentioned in the past in person to people. I heard this from Meidan. There's another famous midrash that talks about Pinchas and says how Pinchas saw what was going on. And then he remembered the halacha. What was the halacha? He remembered that when Moshe came down from Mount Sinai, Moshe told him, Haboel aramit kanaim pogim. That Moshe, when he came down from Mount Sinai, what he came to Pinchas and told him was, in this situation, you see a person being coupling with a Aramite, the zealots can hurt him. Well, that's very strange. Can you believe that this is what was on Moshe's mind when he came down from Mount Sinai? In what context? Where do we see this? It doesn't appear anywhere. Rabbi Dan said, if I recall correctly, he said, Pinchas learned that from what Moshe did, not from what Moshe said. When Moshe came down from Mount Sinai the first time, and he saw the golden calf, what did he do? He didn't go to God and ask him, what should I do? He didn't convene some sort of a tribunal and do all sorts of things with the due process. He took the luchot, he took the tablets and smashed them on the ground and rounded up everybody and did what he needed to do. He didn't ask any questions. He did what had to be done. Pinchas saw this at the same time that he saw his own grandfather not able to stand up to that pressure. At least that's how he saw it. And he internalized that message. And that said basically, when this happens, I can't do it. Maybe he didn't see, maybe he wasn't alive at the time, maybe he was. But he took in that story and he internalized that message. It said, sometimes the only way to stop something is to act and not to start thinking and worrying and wondering and processing. Being a zealot is not a career. Being a zealot is something you are on the spur of the moment. You see something and you act on it, and something deep inside you has to sort of cry out to demand action for you to be categorized that way. I wish for all of us that we almost never reach that point, that we live a balanced life. But it's a good thing to remember that when that moment comes, there's a reason why God lets us have those emotions and to drive us forth. And so to see that also as a positive force in our lives if and when the moment demands it. Shabbat shalom.